Okay, Boker Tov. Good morning. We are in up to chapter 11. We have Baruch Hashem learned chapters 1 through 10, and now we're going to begin chapter 11, discussing. We discussed from chapters 1 through 7, as we mentioned a few times. That was discussing the idea of God's unity is not affected by the worlds. And we explained because the worlds are totally buttled, totally nullified before God. Then we explained chapters 8, 9, and 10 that Hashem's Sefiros, Hashem's Midas, do not affect God's unity. When we say God's unity, we're talking about that God is not a composite, God forbid. That God is B'tachas Hapshitus, an absolute oneness that can't be described or analyzed or measured. And we said Hashem's Midas don't create the conflict of this, and that we said for the opposite reason, not because they're bottled, because they don't have a separate identity. They're one with God. Created beings, creation is bottled, doesn't have identity, and the Sefiros, the Midas, don't have a separate identity, and they're one with God. They're one with Hashem. Now we're going to discuss something which is between those two. What exists between Hashem's Midas and between creation? This is how we start off the whole Shaar Hayichud Chapter, discussing the Asar Mamoros. That's going to be the final challenge that we have. It's going to take us through chapters 11 and then 12, is understanding the oneness of God as it affects or relates to the Mamoros. As you know, when Hashem created the world, Hashem created the world with 10 utterances. Now, we're going to go back to some of our knowledge that we have from Tanya about Dibur, some of our discussion from earlier in Shaar Hayichud Chapter about Dibur, to understand and analyze what is Dibur and how is this a question and how it's answered. What's the question first? The question is like this. While we said clearly that the Sefiros are one with Hashem, don't have a separate identity, but the bottom line is the nature, the essence, the description of Dibur is to share with others. What is speech? Speech is, I have something within me, and I'm going to share it with somebody else. I have a knowledge, I have a question, I have a feeling, and Dibur allows me to share with another. It's sort of the interface, it's the output of myself. In other words, oisios really are, words really are something outside of myself. It is, yes.
And Hashem creates the world with words.
And Hashem created with words. We have to understand. So we're not discussing creation as a challenge, because with that we explained it's completely bottled. We're not questioning midos, because midos don't have an identity. They're one with God. There's no separate identity. For us, the created beings, for us, from our perspective, we see midos as like someone sees sunlight outside the sun. Oh wow, there's something called sunlight. To you, there's sunlight, not within the sun. The sunlight doesn't have an identity there. But now we have to understand what's the role of Mamoros. Mamoros seems to be a vehicle or a tool or a force or a power or an energy that is used to transmit and share with others, which means it's something outside of myself, something. And how could that be? How could we say, and by the way, what is the Asar Mamoros expressing? Either Midas or Seichel. It's expressing something. So let's see this chapter 11.
Is sign language considered Dibur?
For this purpose,
What do you call sign language?
like talking like this.
Talking
Yeah.
to you?
No. People who sign.
Okay. Thank you.
I would think sign language, for this purpose, yes. For this purpose, yeah, but not what we're going to get to when we talk about the
Trying to communicate.
essence of, because we'll see when we get later into speech, we'll see speech, I'll just mention it now, but we'll see it more later, has many ways that it manifests itself. Many ways that it manifests itself. For an example, when you speak, there's the voice waves that hit your ear and you absorb it. There's the impact on magnetic strip of a tape. There's impact on a digital file that's being created. Speech has many ways that it affects, but it's the same speech. The question is how it impacts, how it affects, and what it is. So we're going to talk about what is speech for itself and what is speech as it affects and how we see speech. So we're going to break speech down a little bit. So in that case, we'll see how we fit in sign language.
Because your intention is to communicate.
Right.
So,
But we're going to see something very interesting is the importance of
and express your thoughts.
Yes, speech is expressing thoughts. I have a thought inside of me, but expressing for what? Usually to other. Now we do know, and we're not going to go into this chapter here, that speech is a tremendous power to draw emotions and intellect for yourself. But again, when you're saying it to itself, it's expressing. But if I'm very emotional about something very painful or special or moving or affecting me, if I talk about it, I'll cry. Why? Because when you speak, it draws down deep within yourself something. Also, the same thing is true when you're learning. If you're trying to understand something, when you talk it out, it actually brings out, it draws from your creative source. It draws from your understanding. When you speak, you actually can understand a subject much better than if you would learn it without speaking. Writing does the same thing, by the way. When you write, you're able to draw down intellect from a deep place. You start writing, before you start, you have what's sometimes called a block. But once you start writing, things flow that you never thought of before because it draws. Again, this is speech and voice. All these things have an effect of drawing down from inside. But now we're going to discuss the question and a quick answer, then we'll go into it. The question is, now this is halfway between Midas and creation. Midas is God's essence, character, so to speak. Creation is something outside or seems to appear to be outside of God. Oisiais, words, are that which really took Hashem's Midas and brought it out. So it seems to be the box or the tool or the bridge. Let's say we'll find the right words for it as we do this chapter. Okay. So right away, we're going to answer the question. Before we explain it, we're going to answer the question right away. Perikut Aleph. Also the 10 utterances, just like we explained in chapters 8, 9, and 10, that the nature of the Midas to appear to be extra or outside or something in addition to God's essence is only compared to the created being. But in truth, it's not that way. The same is true of Asar Mamoris. Gam Asar Mamoris Gam Kein Nikru B'Shem Mamoris Legabe Hanevroim Bavad. Only compared to the created. Do we see it that way, as we're going to talk about? We see it as something extra. God created a speech. God spoke, and it's something outside of himself. But in truth, as we'll see the differences between God's speech and our speech, there is no speech outside of God at all. And he explains, just like by a person, and this is something to think about. We're going to say the next line or two. It takes a lot of thinking about to try and accept this idea or understand this idea. When someone has an emotion that you're going to express, whether the emotion is crying, happiness, giving charity, giving a hug, yelling at somebody, whatever the emotion is, there is a step that must happen before the emotion takes place. And if that step doesn't happen, the emotion doesn't take place. What is that step? Thinking. You see, the emotion by itself is so far disconnected from anything physical, any material, any world interface and world interaction, that it must be developed and come through a channel, a process called thought. A person cannot have an emotion without thought. Sometimes you'll say, what are you talking about? I didn't even think for a second. I just blurted it out. We don't always realize what goes through our process. It's our minds work so quickly. We get into the subconscious, it's incredibly quickly. But even at the subconscious, even our thinking abilities on a conscious level happen sometimes so quick that we don't even know that we thought about something. Later, if we go back and think, why did I do that? Because that bothers me. But at the time, it happens so quickly. But it's impossible, says the Alter Rebbe here, for a feeling, an emotion to be expressed in action without thinking about it first. Now, if you ever don't think about it, it will be a very unusually weird expression. For example, let's take away emotions. Let's use intellect. Everything I say must go through my mind, thinking about it. If I don't, what's going to come out is gibberish. Sometimes people speak without thinking. What comes out, you could tell they weren't thinking when they spoke. And it's even more so if you're just literally letting it flow words from your mouth. You can say the silliest things that make no sense at all. For something logical to come out or a normal emotion to come out, it must have thought. If you skip thought, what comes out, something can come out. but it's not at all functioning or practical. That makes no sense. It's unhealthy. So we're going to see here, and we'll go into explain it. So in order for an emotion to be expressed, we explain in chapter 4 of Tanya. Chapter 4 of Tanya, yep. And in chapter 5, chapter 4 was the anatomy of the soul. Chapter 3 and 4. Chapter 3 and 4. The anatomy of the soul, meaning the koiches hanefesh, the powers of the soul was 3. And chapter 4 spoke about the garment of the soul. So in chapter 3, we explained that our koiches hanefesh, our soul, is made up of 10 powers. Both our animal soul and our godly soul is made up of 10 powers. What are these 10 powers? Matching the 10 Sefiros. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes. That's a Chayis Sid Malchus. Those 10 powers of the soul are powers in our soul. Those don't do anything. Those need to interface to the world, need a certain item. That's called levushim, garments. Machshava, dibur, and maisa. For the midas to come into dibur, and then of course the maisa, it must go through machshava. It must go through on some level to be a healthy thought. The feelings, the powers of the soul, these are the 6 or the 7 emotive powers. When they want to come out and express themselves in action, to give a child a hug, give a coin to a charity box, yell at somebody who's taking your seat by the shul table, whatever it is. In order for that expression to come out, you must have it pass through your thought. Must first enclose itself in the letters, in the structure of thought. And he gives an example. For an example, the midah of chesed and rachamim, which really is chesed, but it's really chesed and teferes, but it's chesed. It's impossible to express it. If you have kindness in your heart, and you don't, by the way, what's the definition of somebody who is a disconnected, cruel person? He has a disconnect between his emotions and his actions. It's an unhealthy thing. You have the word for it. I forget the words right now. It's a disconnect, and that's caused a very dangerous person.
Yes.
A healthy person, you have a feeling, it goes through your mind, and it comes into action. You see a person that just slipped, you run to help them up and pick them up. Your brain said go. Your mind said go. And same thing with any emotion, whether it's kindness, which is by definition chesed, is attraction, whether it's rachamim, which is empathy, a mercy, you must have it go through your mind. You must have a thought go through your mind, and you have to think about you must think about what you're going to do. You must have a process where your thought sort of entertains, and it happens very quickly, but it goes through your mind first. Because if not, it's impossible to have it without machshava. So in other words, in order to have a functioning, healthy response, there's a very beautiful Hartzig Sikha of the Rebbe, where he talks about the true kindness of somebody. So if a person is hungry for water, and you say, come, have some bread, that's not kindness. That means I want to give bread. I was watching yesterday a short little clip from Manis Friedman. I thought it was a very interesting point he made. His point was, he says, somebody says they want to be a better mother, want to be a better wife, they want to be a better person. His point is, why is it about what you want to be? Think about what the person needs. Why is it about yourself? Think about, what does this person need? I don't know if you'll be a better friend or a better husband, a better mother, or a better whatever, but you could do right now what this person needs. We have this thing in our mind. And again, so are you thinking what's good for me? If I want to be a better mother, or I want this child to have what it needs right now, whether it's strict, whether it's kindness, doesn't matter. But are you thinking what the child needs or what makes you a better person? Very interesting. But there's a process, and based on that process, it will determine if you're going to give the guy water or bread. Are you gonna sponsor this or pay for that? Are you gonna help the guy do this? Because what will make me better will make him better. In other words, the thought process will determine if you're going to take the poor person and give him a sandwich, or you take the poor person and say, hey, you want to ride? I tell you a funny story. What does the person need? You're only going to do the logical response to what the person needs if it passes through your machshava. Otherwise, how are you channeling an emotion of feeling of empathy to translate it in? I feel bad for this person. I'm going to give him a hot cup of soup. Or I feel bad for him. I'm going to draw him a funny picture. Well, what does he need? You have to have a thought process that determines what this person needs, because in this sort, and here's the key, and this is the key to the point of this chapter, in its source of empathy, in its source of kindness, in its source of love, those parameters don't exist. A cup of tea, a cup of coffee, I'm going to draw you a nice picture, I'll tell you a story, I'll give you a quote. In there is just a feeling. That feeling needs seichel, needs machshava to drive it into what it needs to be. And it happens quickly to know, I feel bad for this guy, he's cold, I'm getting him a jacket, I'll bring him into my home. Versus, he's cold, I'm going to, give him a nice toy to play with. It's because in your essence of midas, there is no expression or no parameter how to express it. All of that, how to take this and channel it into an action, it's like electricity versus coming through a vacuum cleaner. Electricity versus coming through a air conditioner. In the heart, the chesed is a certain type of electricity, which is called the giving type, the compassionate type, the expressing type, the sharing type. That what you share and how you do it, that has to come through machshava. And that will give us a window to understand the point we're going to say in this chapter. And he gives an example. One more thing. And sometimes he says certain times it's not enough to have machshava. You have to also have dibur. In which case, let's say you're a big macher, you own a big company, or you're a king, and you see a situation in your city where there's a problem. It's not enough to think acts of kindness in your mind and what needs to be done. You actually give the instructions. Sometimes you got to go and say, you, a guy, go to this guy that doesn't have a job and give him a job. Go to this person and make sure his taxes are lower. Meaning the king is not enough to think. Certain roles you can't think, you have to give instructions, because if you're in a position of power or a position of influence, it's not sometimes not going to be, and the same thing God forbid for evil. The people who do evil, sometimes they do evil themselves. Sometimes they tell someone else, go and hurt these people. God forbid, we saw it happen in many countries and historically. How one person with speech is able to do tremendous destructive damage. Why? Because he couldn't affect enough with his thought. His hatred in his own heart and his feelings was enough to do some damage on his own, but to do mass damage, he had to mix in speech that could communicate it even further. So, and sometimes when your nature is, or your role in this universe is, where you have influence on others, that you can command somebody, for example, a king. Then you got to take it to another level. Not only does my actions need to be preempted by thought, but it's about to also follow before action, after thought, with dibur, so I can instruct the people, go and do this kindness, or go and do this not kindness. And the same thing, by the way, is true. Sometimes the vehicle, he says in a bracket, I'm not sure why, I was trying to see why I didn't have a chance to find anything. The same thing is true, and I can think of why, but I'm not sure, so I'll leave it. The same thing is true if your end game is that what's needed right now is just words of compassion. Sometimes a person, your heart tells you, your midas tell you love, and if love is needed is go and sit and talk to this person. Listen, give them words of encouragement, build up self-confidence, tell them how much they're loved. So therefore, again, in that case, it's not going to lead to an action outside of dibur. But again, the process is going to be from midas to machshava and then to dibur. Okay. So now that we understand this concept, how it exists within the human being, that he has a process that before he goes to action. Yeah, and action, by the way, if you want to just take the big square we're talking about here, we have Hashem's midas, we spoke about in chapters 8, 9, and 10. We have Hashem's action, which we spoke about in chapters 1 through 7. Now, to get from midas to creation, what's in the middle? Oisios, the 10 mamaris. So now the same thing, that's what we're doing here in this picture. Hashem's midas, Hashem's attributes, Hashem's Sefiros. When it comes into action, when it comes to be revealed and have its effect in this world, which means your midas will create light and heavens and earth and water and sun and planets and fish and birds and animals, etc. When all that's going to be created, top of the next page. And that's called a mimer. What's the process of Hashem creating? Hashem creating, so to speak, a created being. That process, that middle interface is called Maris. So just like we have from our midas to come to action, there has to be machshava and sometimes dibur. Hashem has the same thing. The Asar Maris are the matching process. We have to go from inside our heart, a power of passion, compassion, or love, or hatred, or strictness, whatever it might be. To bring it out, it needs to go through machshava and dibur sometimes, but machshava certainly before action. Hashem's process to go from his sefiros, his midas, into creation of the world requires first a process called words. It's the forming of letters, the formation. What does this process do? This process takes a unharnessed energy and becomes a certain focused energy. Now we're making a frog. Now we're making trees. Now we're making this. Now we're giving them makais. Whatever the action is going to be, we're taking it from midas into action through a process called machshava dibur. That is asar v'maris. Asar v'maris are this process of expression, letters, words, as we spoke, if you remember at the beginning of this section, describing that the words form we said, what was the big deal of Adam naming all the animals? Big deal. I could name them. You're a jup, you're a bop. I can make up words. The answer is he knew which words make up the identity from Hashem's asar v'maris, the identity of a sus, of a behemoth, of a tzayin, etc. He was able to tap into know. So where do those words come from? That's Asar Maris. That means Asar Maris. Before that, the Midas, which is a general act of chesed, of kindness, of sharing energy. How does it develop into Earth or Neptune? That's only because Hashem channeled through the ACAs that level to come into that existence. It's impossible to come into any lasting or any real, I don't know if real is the right word, but any actual creation without belit sirufim hanikroim b'shav, without having the process, just like the person can't give tzedakah or give someone a hot cup of soup without machshava. God, so to speak, that's why you can't. But it's not possible to come from the power, the midah of chesed to the midah of, as we'll see in the second example he'll give, to reality without the process of fine tuning and channeling it. Comes out from all this. What are ACAs? ACAs are pipes. ACAs are tubes. They have no identity of themselves. They have nothing. It's like dib over a person. A person's speech is nothing. The only thing your speech could do is transfer what you have in your heart and your mind. It doesn't have its own supply source, which means if a person, God forbid, has no information in their mind or no feelings in their heart, the dibber won't say anything. That means the dibber is nothing more than a conduit. It's a vehicle. It's a medium to bring something from inside to the outside. The same thing, and basing where the pipes are going, where they're flowing to, that's how it's going to come out. If it's going to come out, in the house next door, in the basement, or the roof, that all depends on the pipes. But the pipes don't have anything for themselves. Less than make klum, that's malchus. So dibur doesn't have any identity for itself. So he's going to say, therefore, it's impossible. Keep going here. Keep going. For an example, on the first day, Hashem said, "Let there be light." How come it came light? Why didn't it come out as water? Why didn't it come out as it's the ACAs? Without the ACAs, Hashem's midas of chesed creates air, chesed creates mayim. Who decided the first day it should be water? Sorry, it should be light and not water? ACAs. If the ACAs would be Yehi Mayim, would have been Mayim. It comes from the same. Chesed creates both of those. Chesed creates a lot of things. What determined that it's going to be and not Mayim is purely the ACAs. So you see the ACAs channel. Sorry.
They're channel, but somebody have to give them the push.
Yeah. Well, that's how it comes through the Sefiros. It's a process. But Hashem's forming of the letters. Now, you want to say where the letters come from? That's a separate discussion. Who shaped the letters? Right. But now we're talking about the letters themselves, the Amoris. That's our question here. Do they have a separate identity? So we're answering they don't. But we didn't finish this yet. But we're going to say all the changes that we see only for the created beings. But it could be asking something else. Say your question again.
I'm just saying, like the otiyot were there before Hashem created the world. Before Hashem, the otiyot.
Well, the ACAs didn't exist before that.
They existed.
The ACAs didn't exist. Now we're going to see in a few moments that God's ACAs, just like we say God's speech and God's mind. Sorry, they would say God's thought does not work like our thought. Same thing. We're going to see God's speech not like our speech. In our speech, we're going to get to this in a few minutes, but I'll mention it now. Our speech, when we speak, there's sus and the speech. Before the speech was somewhere inside my potential, my power, and now the speech, whoop, they say you cannot bring back the speech. There's a very famous tragic story about the guy who used to speak lashon hara, used to speak bad about people, And he comes to the rabbi, he says, I've been speaking Lashon Hara for years. I want to teshuvah. The rabbi says, okay, no problem. Bring me a feather pillow. You know the story. And he takes the feather pillow, walk around town, and cut it and spread the whole feathers around town. He says, okay. He comes back. He said, I'm done. He said, now go get him. Bring him back. He says, I can't. He said, exactly. When you speak Lashon Hara, the process of getting it back is very difficult. It's like when you say words, so when human beings say words, they're out there. You can't take back what you said. By God, the words never leave him. The words are just as much one with God. It's like our thoughts, and more so. Our thoughts are still in our mind before we share them, is one with us. You can't point to the spot and say, that's the thought, that's just, you see me. Same thing, God's words never really leave him. As we'll see, the only way it appears that he left us is to us. To us, it appears that it left. But in truth, in order to leave God, God has to be in a spot here. God has to be, okay, God, you're here. And now the words are leaving you. And there is no spot that the words can go to. The words remain in God always. There's no outside to the whole expression of words by God. The metaphor is only in the channeling and the processing, but not in the separation. So it's like I said last chapter, our metaphor is that we only want to focus on one detail because the whole metaphor we can't use. Dibur by God is a whole different dibur. It doesn't. In order for it to leave me, I have to have where I am. If it stays in me, it didn't leave. But let's just see this inside. So, for example, how do you make sure? How was it, in fact, that on the first day of creation it was light? Let's go back again. For an example, to create oir from the midah of chesed that Hashem created the world with chesed. Nimshach mimena hamshachas pa'ula v'koyach lifel v'livrei b'yaseh. He brought down first a power to create. There was something from the source. There was a power. There was an energy. There was a force that could create. And what created that it should be focused on light and become an actual structure of light? That is the words, let there be light. Even though we can't compare our thought to Hashem's, meaning we're using for the metaphor, if you noticed, we use our machshava as a metaphor for God's words. It's interesting. We use our machshava process for a metaphor for God's words. Now, even though you can't compare Hashem's words to our thought, it's still not a good metaphor. Nevertheless, we could use it as a way to express the idea of coming. Just like our machshava could fine-tune something to calm an emotion, to give someone a hot cup of soup, or to express our chesed a certain way. The same thing, the oisies of the Mamoris express that things should come out in a certain way of creation. And that's why what came out, what caused that this force of chesed should create and not create something else, because many things come from chesed. In the world we have things from chesed, things from gvura, So what made it that it came out as and not something else? For example, why didn't it come suddenly the world's filled with water that we have later? One second. Oh, like it happened. You say like it happened soon. That it developed. Here's a question, and we spoke about this a while back. I think in chapter 6 or 7, we didn't mention anywhere in the 10 Commandments water, even though it does say you cover Hamayim. That's later. We're not creating of Mayim. So how does Mayim, certain things get created? They get created by the tzuruf eisius. When Hashem uses the mem from here or the yud from here, he forms it from different formats that we said. There's gematrias and there's letter exchanges and there's all different ways that we have exchanges depending on how much we're going to conceal the original. So the water eventually comes out. So the water eventually comes out in a different siruf called water. But why did it come out originally as That's because it started out as the formation of letters that spell and shape it to Now, you still remain with your question.
You mean because water was there already when he did the or?
No, not because the water was there. Because Hashem's process. How did Hashem, for example, create goats? It doesn't mention anywhere in Ten Commandments goats. and 10 memories, and 10 utterances. It's because you take letters and you restructure them, reform them, it becomes the word Gedi or Aiz.
Not only that, Adam with the energy was able to
So but
assign.
but all of the energy of Chesed and then mixing it with Gevura has a power to create. Now, what channel did you create? All different things. So all it is electricity, so to speak. All it is power. It's the ICAs which are forming and shaping each of the created beings in that shape based on the letters. So the letters don't really have a power for themselves. The letters are just the pipes or the formations, or you want to use it, the colors of the Sefiros really are ones we use as different colored glasses. But the letters shape how it's going to come out in what way. Just like your mind will determine, what should I do for this hungry person? Should I give him hot soup? Should I give him a cookie? Should I give him a steak? All the right things are coming to your mind based on what the thought process tells you is the right, smart thing to do for this person. Hashem has the same process called Mamaris, but of course in a whole different level of oneness. V'nimtza. Just going back one line. Ki kol chayis v'keiches hanimshachas v'medeis v'akdeishes l'tachtonim l'baram. All of the powers, all of the life force that was drawn down from Hashem's Sefiros, from Hashem's middays, the holy middays, to the lower worlds, Nasiya, to create. The bottom yesh ulachiyesam ulakaimam, not just to give them life, but to make them exist. Nikru b'shem eiseis hakdeishes. Those are called the eiseis hakdeishes, or the asar mamaris. Shehein bechinas hamshachas achayis. That is the drawing down the life made it seinei v'chachmasai umideisav. That brings it down from the levels of Hashem's ratzain. Hashem is chachma, Hashem is midas. Those are the less levels of keser and seichel and midas. This aves eilumais ulachesam, to create worlds and to give them life. So the Asar Mamaris' job was to give life to everything in existence in its right form that's needed. Now he's going to add another point here. He's going to separate now between machshava and dibur by Hashem. Even though we're using by us machshava as a metaphor to understand Hashem, we're going to go and use both metaphors by Hashem. What do you say by Hashem as machshava, and what do you say as dibur? And the answer is going to be, what's the difference machshava and dibur by us? Difference is it hidden or revealed by a human being? If I'm thinking something, it's hidden. No one knows what I'm thinking. I mean, sometimes you can see a guy's expressions. I know what you're thinking. But usually thought, if I have an idea or a feeling, you don't know what's in their mind. But words, you share it, it shares information. So the same thing, Hashem's machshava creates the hidden worlds, and his dibur creates the revealed worlds. What do we mean hidden and revealed? In general, we call it alma de escalia and alma de escasia. We know that the metaphors, when we come to the Kriyas Yamsuf, we're reading about it in the Chumash soon. We're reading now in the Chumash about the plagues. Parshas Boy, next week is Beshalach. We're going to talk about the splitting of the sea. We know the splitting of the sea was a preparation for Matan Torah. Why? Because on the sea top, before you go into the sea, all of what's in the sea is hidden. You only see what's revealed is on the dry land is revealed. You can see there's a person, there's an animal, but in the sea you don't see anything. It's all in the concealed way. And there's much more. There's much that we're going to discover in the sea. There's probably much more we don't know about the sea. So therefore, Alma de Escasia represents the concealed world. You don't see something. Usually it goes to Bria, the world of Bria, where things are hidden, and the world Nasiya, where things are revealed. So the Machshav Hashem creates the hidden worlds, and the Dibur Hashem creates the revealed worlds. That's the metaphor match. Not that the speech really is speech or the thought really is thought, but what the process is, what we see from the thought and speech. So let's see this inside. V'heim shnei mini elamois, and these two ideas of Machshav and Dibur by Hashem really creates two types of worlds. Almin stimin deloyas galyin, worlds that are hidden and not revealed. And just by the way, what exactly you're referring to depends on the situation, which means what's hidden and what's revealed is constantly changing when we discuss who it's hidden from. Is it hidden from us human beings? Mm-hmm. Is it hidden from the angels? Is it hidden from souls? So sometimes you'll find that Alman Steam in hidden worlds refers to this level, and sometimes to this level. Well, it depends what we're referring to. Who is it hidden from? So you have the first level is Alman Steam and Loyas Galion. Hema Mesabim Mechayim Bekayamim Mikeches have Hamshachais Nelomis. That is what's created from the hidden and concealed powers of Hashem. From For an example, by a person, his thought conceals and hides what's you don't see it. It's concealed and hidden. The Alma the Isgalian, also what's created from Hashem's Dibur is Nivru v'Chayim is Mehesgalus Shenisgalu Keiches and Meshachas and Elamais Hanikros B'Shem Eisis Machshava Shem B'Chinas Isgalus Lachiyes Alma the Isgal Nikum B'Shem Amaris. And when these levels of creation, which are called Machshava, come down further to the point that they're revealed, because in general the process is that whatever is on the level of creation comes from that the next level, meaning it's almost like a continuous flow of gradient level to level. So that which we have today in Dibur, which is the revealed worlds, they actually are a result, a reflection, or a manifestation of that which was previously a machshava. So when we see something down here, this is why things are so. For an example, the Rebbe once gave a talk why Rebbe Hayimechabed Hashirim. It says that Rebbe would give respect to wealthy people. Why? It seems to be such a non-spiritual way, because he has money, you respect him. He says the same reason why I have to give respect to a king, for that matter. If Hashem made in this world, he has something a lot of, that means he has a lot of that spiritually. So a person who is wealthy has tremendous potential spiritually. As you can see, they could do tremendously good things or tremendously bad things. But the potential for good is because they have great resources of life. Everything we see in this world, when it's cold and empty or dark, that reflects in the higher worlds. That's a cold, empty, dark source. So every single thing that we have really came from the higher level. So the revealed worlds that we have is not some other track. You have one track of hidden and one track of revealed. It's all one track. It starts off in Hashem's Midas. It flows down to Machshava, which is hidden, and then it flows even further down to be revealed. That's what he says here. If you go back 2 lines, we read this inside again. He says, Almen de Iskalion, middle of the line, Nivru v'chayim meheskalos. It comes from, and it's created from, the revelation, Sheneskalu keiches v'hamshachas hanalamis, the revelation of that which was concealed and hidden, Hanikrois b'shem eises hamachshava, which was earlier called just eises letters of machshava, and when they come down further to revealed state, lahachiyes almen the Iskalion, to give now life to the revealed worlds, which in this case would be the physical world we live in today. The Krois b'shem Amoris, they are called the name Amoris because there they become words that are spoken. So in other words, what does it mean by Hashem spoken? What does it mean thought? It depends how it's revealed. Is it more concealed or more revealed? Tells you if it's machshava or if it's dibur. For an example, just to finish this point here, for an example, by a human being, a person who speaks, what does speech do? I have a feeling inside me. I have information inside of me. I have a yearning or a longing or a sadness. When I speak, I'm sharing that which was concealed there. It was always there, but now I'm taking it to the next level. He said, my speech reveals to those people who are listening what is hidden and concealed in my heart. Now we're going to stop here.